departments. We got the new chief, lieutenant, and patrol, and then we supported the seniors.
Awesome. All right. Easy. That was great. Quick and easy. Who wants to go next? Come on down. Very light. I just got price is right. Although there's no prizes. Right. Goals at the end, clear direction.
The prize is right here.
Okay. Since we've been part of the goal and in the continued, they've been supporting OMIC and expansion and growth. This is has to do with Alex about securing ARPA funds, and so we were able to allocate funds to businesses.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, infrastructure and hosting.
and then the launch of the committees of the 50-year and Park and Rec plan. And then keeping our initial staff like the city planner. I got to name it new name. And then also hiring the chief and lieutenant.
Oh, yeah. So we'll just add that over there. Awesome. Okay. Who wants to come on down next? All right. Great.
See, the themes are starting.
Yeah.
Okay, so kick off the 50-year plan, council goal 2.2.
Okay.
We completed, well, we received a grant from DLCD to complete a housing needs analysis update, and that's completed in draft form.
Awesome.
We've been able to watch the construction of OMIC's second building, which we reviewed planning.
Yeah.
Council goal 1.6.
Very cool.
Economic opportunities analysis draft is completed. We have a really strong partnership with CET, which is Columbia Economic Team, OMIC, PCC, Columbia County, and Port of Columbia County, goal 1.5. And this is by no means indicating how significant this is because it's on a small postie, but I ran out, but hired an associate planner.
Okay. It's as an effort, so that's.
Yeah.
And I have more Post-its, so no Post-it shortage. I almost ran out in terms of yesterday, so make sure it restocked. You guys. All right, who wants to come next?
Lauren, let me jump. You want This is tagging on with the ARPA. We're actually getting the projects kicked off. We're in design on several of them right now.
Okay.
Over the last 4 years, we've reduced our water loss by 20%.
Nice.
Very monumental. We have the infrastructure projects moving forward. We have 2 more in design right now, and 1 just finished construction for water. We have sidewalk projects in design as we speak. Kick off this summer. Paving projects in design kicking off this summer. The dryer that we presented to council is state of the art, and the DEP loves it. We'll be the first in the state of Oregon to use this technology.
Cool.
New meters, the customers are loving them for water loss. If there's a leak, we can tell them, so that saves them money back then, and they like that. And then the stormwater master plan will be wrapping up this year.
Are those installed, Dave, the new water meter?
Now, only about 20% so far.
Okay, police leadership,
Yeah,
on there already.
perfect.
One that's really hot is park maintenance and improvements, 50 Crown Z Trail,
Okay.
and Adventure Fest. Very, very successful. Support for the community and community center.
Sure.
I have that up there, yep.
There it is.
And just a general ARPA funding, and particularly how it was worked out that we were able to support Habitat.
All right, thanks, Pete. Okay, who's next?
I did the gas tax and sidewalk and gold events,
Okay.
piggybacking on Dave. And then we got the state to allow us to use census data instead of Portland State stuff on a couple of things, not everything, but that literally was us.
Why is
Well,
that important?
If you remember, our population
Needs
said
now.
was 7,400. That extra 600 people, every state shared dollar we were getting shorted, and now we will be less shorted.
Okay. Oh.
One of the new ones, so I wasn't around for a lot of these, but, I've been seeing like Columbia Commerce Park completion up to this point. I don't know how much was done this year, but it sounds like it's ready to go. You have the 50-year plan. I did that, continued progress of that. I don't know exactly when it started. And then further advancement of the park master plan is one of the big reasons I got involved. And then I saw a beautification and development of Chapman Landing and CC Trail. And then continued partnership with OMIC. And then I kind of saw, mine's a lot of park theme, but the Grabhorn ad hoc developed the 3 plans. I think that got done earlier in the year.
All right. Awesome. Who's next?
The start of the 50-year plan, Adventure Fest. Improvements were made with fuel tax dollars. Senior Center progress. I called it a police reboot, but it entails everything that's there. Peace Candle improvements, master plan updates. We now have the presence of the YMCA in Scappoose. Communication, transparency with our newsletter, social media, and then the allocation of ARPA funds. Specifically, I left our help for habitat.
Cool. All right, Tyler, what do you got?
I got the approval for the well, that's worked on. I think this is probably gonna be the most popular one with the ARPA funds. Sidewalks. And this should be continued past tense for support a senior center. And we brought critical information forward regarding the public safety radio system.
All right, thanks, Tyler. What else? Yeah.
Depends along the lines of events for the community, movies in the park. Adjacent to Adventure Fest, infrastructure improvements with ARPA funds. Support for senior center. Stakeholder, so 50-year plan, but the thing that I really have enjoyed about that is the stakeholder and citizen engagement that came from that. It's really important for the community. And then I think the city's done an excellent job with the social media presence and getting info out.
Okay. What do you got, Carol?
Well, first I had to learn about the city, so. I was gonna put that. We changed from our accounting system from accrual to cash to accrual.
Okay. Why is that important?
Because we're too big to be cash.
Yes.
You know, the city is just too large.
Yeah.
We have too much, enterprise money.
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult to bond on a cash basis, and so we wanted to make sure too that the urban renewal budgets, the city budgets were the same, so that we could start looking at bonding at some point. And so a lot of the reports that automatically are required with the modified accrual were not required with cash, and so we weren't producing the kind of reports that would allow us to do that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put Carol on the spot and ask those questions, but I mean, even in my master's program, government accounting is confusing, and so it's important to know like what these things mean.
It is very confusing. And I improved staff's use of the accounting system.
All right.
And one of those big things is we've switched over to electronic payable accrual, so we're not sending stacks of paper
For me to sign.
around
Yay.
for approvals. They're all electronic.
Good job, Carol.
Efficiency. Way to go, Carol. All right, Isaac, come on down.
Social media, I'm predicting.
This one is internal, it's process improvement generally, and do a lot with.
Yes, we've done a lot. Phones.
PD, chief LT, more staff. Both sets of ARPA money, infrastructure and, work and media. Media.
Yes. Thank you.
Just have a couple, they've already been said, but, started the Parks Master Plan. The ever popular Adventure Fest. I think it was last year that it was officially made an annual thing, maybe it was the year before, but that part of it, every year.
Yeah.
Fun. All right. What else? Please. Got from the PD.
Short time, so I'm not a lot. I hired a new lieutenant, 2 officers in evidence tech. Spent the better part of the last few months building relationships. Was finally able in December to attend the academy. Team building, I think, now that the lieutenant on board, Alex, Isaac, Chris and I are starting to build a good team. And learning the community.
Okay.
And one of the best parts was movies in the park, being able to cook for everybody.
Awesome. Oh, you cooked?
Yeah.
All right, so you not only got to attend, but you, keep the mass, you keep the masses safe and feed them. That's good. Other duties as assigned. Okay. Did we miss anything major?
Regarding ARPA funds, I've always dreamed about having millions of dollars to give away.
How does it feel, Pete?
It feels really good.
Well,
Now I'm broke.
Yeah. No, right, you're out of money.
I think there's a lot to be proud of. And I think this also highlights some of the important stuff that's underway. That's not going to stop because you guys have some funds dedicated to these projects. And so I just want you, we talk about accomplishments, but it's also important to take that into consideration. You have some big engagement efforts underway. And so while we talk about organizational capacity, there's council involvement in this stuff too. So as you think about what goals you set for yourselves and the organization, think about how much capacity you have to approve things in meetings, to engage with the community on things. So the more you pile on the plate, like not only does Alex have to balance that for the organization, but you also have to think about how you're going to engage with all that stuff and still, maintain your other life commitments. Unless this is your only job and you guys just dedicate it to all things, all Scappoose. But I've not met somebody who doesn't have a life outside of local government. So
Pete's the closest.
the closest. I hear he's got some tennis obligations too.
I mean, just by the retirement front, not any of the other things.
Make sure you save some time for tennis, Pete. Okay, so let's talk about some other we'll get into the goal highlights in a second. First, I want to start with just some other contextual factors. And so when we think about context, a couple things usually come up. And I think we did a context mapping exercise the last time, so some of you will be somewhat familiar with this, but I want to do just a high level thing, just what do we need to be thinking about economic climate. So Alex will just give you a quick overview of budget stuff, but there may be other economic climate things that you want to raise. So we'll talk about economic climate. We'll also talk about community needs that are bubbling up, maybe organizational needs that we need to keep in mind. You've heard staff mention some, these don't always typically make it to the level of council goals, but some process improvement stuff that takes up staff time. So again, we want to mention those things so that you have an idea as elected officials of how staff is kind of spending their time and needs to allocate some time to be dedicated on. Some cities have like a certain percentage. They're like this percentage of time is what gets dedicated to council goals, which kind of helps to really make it real for folks of like, there's not a lot of extra capacity to go towards some of the specific special things that you want to work on. Because a lot of it is just like keeping the lights on, providing those basic services, and then also doing some of the things that need to happen to modernize the organization. So anyhow, so we'll talk about organizational trends, community needs, economic climate, and the other fun one, political factors. There's a lot, the legislature is in session, and there's a lot going on down there. So there may be some things that we want to highlight for folks to just be aware of. So let's start with economic climate. Alex, you want to just give us a quick update on just city financial picture?
Sure. So everyone has a copy of the most recent quarterly report just for your review. And this did go out a couple weeks ago, but we just provided another copy. So it's essentially more or less the same report. I think it might be slightly updated, Carol, is that correct?
Yeah, there's most of the month of January.
Okay, so most of the month of January is in here as well. So as I kind of mentioned, typically speaking, this goal setting session is well ahead of any prep for the coming fiscal year's budget, because we actually want to hear what it is you want to accomplish so we can budget to those goals. I get that sometimes, we're not always going to have the financial needs to meet everything, but I I think there is value in goal setting to what you really want as opposed to already being hemmed in by this idea that you don't have any money to do anything. We do have a big list of projects already ongoing. I do expect the general fund to be very tight this year, which would include departments like parks, police, planning that are all coming from that fund. So I don't expect there to be money for new positions. We added 3 last year, and I don't think we're going to be able to do anything with added positions at this point. We're going to do our best to keep on the part, we'll figure out how to bring on the part-time evidence tech. But aside from that, I really don't see much ability to add positions. And to be honest, and this would not apply to any staff, but I will be looking for areas in the general fund to cut from most likely. We're going to need to. So there's just not a lot of money to change or play with, so to speak. Dave, I know you had some thoughts about like parks specifically. We would maybe start some kind of savings specific to
Yeah,
that
there's,
fund for
yeah,
capital projects moving forward.
you want me to touch on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a desire to build new parks and new infrastructure, and we need to come up with some strategy to do that. The way that the Parks Fund has worked in the past is it's kind of sort of say, use it or lose it money. After, at the end of the fiscal year, it goes back into the general fund and gets reallocated for the next year. So this particular year with the master plan, we've kind of put the capital stuff on hold until we have some clear direction. I think the one thing we learned with Grabhorn is there was no clear vision, and that's what we want to correct before we make any more, monumental steps forward. So the one thing about building new parks is that's dependent on SDCs. Well, without development, we don't get SDCs. So we need other funding mechanisms to drive the parks for building it. And one idea that we've talked about is some sort of a savings program where council just identifies a certain value that every year you want to contribute 50,000 or whatever that number is, so that it builds up so that when the time is right, there's additional funds to help with match for grants if we were lucky enough to be awarded a grant. Or even if we're not, there's still some money there to help build these things. So food for thought.
And I think the challenge for us too is that, our parks are still very much grant dependent, but anything like that's going to help. And also, we've sometimes used SDCs, but those take a long time to build up. And so for instance, when we did Chief Homley Park, that wiped out our SDCs and they still have not recovered. I think there's still only a couple $100,000 back in there. So that is not a quickly renewing source of funds for parks. And so it's very, very challenging for us to add new parks. We will be looking at ways to increase certain areas of revenue. So for instance, I'm actually renegotiating the franchise agreement with the PUD, and they've agreed to increase their percentage from 4% to 5%. So we'll see a little bit of an increase there, and that'll be coming before you all fairly soon for approval. We're doing a study for all the fees in the planning department at Community Development Center. So you all can really see if those fees are actually supporting our staff fully or not. And granted, there's a lot of very legitimate reasons to have your fees that aren't so crazy high that you're not killing development, but I think it's good to be aware of how far short you're falling in terms of actually supporting the staff members doing that work. So that's a discussion that's upcoming. So we're trying to be creative and think of ways. There's going to be things we'll come to you with financially speaking with stormwater master plan wrapping soon. There's going to be financial considerations there where we're going to be probably looking at raising certain fees, and there'll be SDC studies and all of that. So there will be things like that, but I'm not going to sit here and paint a overly rosy picture either. I think it's going to be a tough year for the general fund, to be honest.
Oh, and I just want you guys to know that is really a depressing report. But that has been really the same in every city that I've worked in this year. That is just the impact in which we are living right now. It makes goal setting a little less fun.
Yeah, inflation's been difficult. We're seeing a lot of increase in costs across the board. We also have the new rules the legislature passed, like for instance, for the paid leave. So for the first year, the city's actually going to get insurance and cover the employee pickup. But in the future, if the state increases that, we may not be able to keep doing that, in which case that might fall again for a percentage of that on the employees. So there's just a lot of things we're seeing go up, unfortunately.
Can I ask a question then? Just on basic, like when you talked about parks and looking at this budget, actual was 430,000, budget 695. If there's extra money, is there 263,000 extra dollars, and then that goes back into the general fund?
That's correct.
And so you're talking about a savings plan. Can we direct that if you have savings that can go back into your fund?
Well, that's what we're talking
That's what we're
about.
talking
Is it, is it on the front end, we would just allocate a certain amount that year that would go into a savings account? You know, like I said, hypothetically, 50,000.
We say use it or lose it. I mean, it's not like,
Right.
it's not like the part, like, oh, well, you didn't use it, so we're just not gonna give you any money for parks this year. I mean, that's not what we're saying, but we're talking about being a little bit more diligent on actually doing a savings account specific to
Yeah,
parks.
The point is, it doesn't carry over into the next year.
Right, it doesn't.
The parks is the only fund that doesn't have a contingency. There's no rollover funds
Right.
for the next year from unused. It just goes
So
back into the
it'd be our
general
goal
bucket.
to change that.
And then, yeah, it all gets kind of remanaged for the next year, depending on where those expenses are.
Question. Oh, well.
Go ahead.
So Kim and I attended a session yesterday with the League of Cities. Yeah, and it was really good to attend. And, you know, what we kept hearing is that cities are having trouble, especially because the ARPA funds kept coming up. A lot of their projects are now being implemented. And so they're finding that the costs went up and sometimes now they're stuck, not able to do those projects because it wasn't projected the cost of increase. So, and so I thought about, you know, obviously us and so with this type of savings plan with that, you know, I know we're talking about Parks and Recs, but can it be something just on infrastructure? Because I mean, I'm hearing 30% increase on, we don't know what's, you know, within the year, what the increase of supply and demand and all the, what you're gonna need if it's gonna increase. So are we?
So some of the challenge with that too is that everyone has this money and so everyone needs the same contractors at the same time. So that doesn't help. And yes, there's supply chain issues. There's all these things that are driving up costs. You're absolutely right. The good thing is that this council was really forward thinking, actually took some of that ARPA money and stuck it back into public works for some cost overruns. We do have some loans in place with DEQ for certain.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when we turned in these applications, we already knew. We knew that those were based on numbers that were a few years old and that the costs were likely gonna come in higher. And we're assuming that there's a possibility of taking on some debt to complete these projects, especially for the reservoir. We're talking a multi-million-dollar project. You know, that may have a $2 million shortfall. That's where we're waiting to find out, but do you want to lose 4 million by not taking on the 2 million debt? You know, that's not necessarily good business either. So it's worth the incentive to take that if that's the route we have to go.
But we're absolutely planning for that and anticipating that to be an issue. Yes.
Peter?
Yes, so we are seeing bids coming in at 20 to 30% higher than anticipated. What's even more scary is that contractors are not making money on those. So like the feedback I'm getting in other jurisdictions is that the projects are costing more than the bids, even though the bids were 20 to 30% more than the engineers estimated. And if that were one jurisdiction, it might be one engineer lowballing it and one contractor not making money. But it's enough jurisdictions that it's just, and I don't know if it's employee costs or exactly what the reason is, but we're not happy with the bids and they're not happy because they're losing money. And so if anything, the prices are going to go up more.
And the other kind of wild card here too is actually that we will be, we do have some union negotiations upcoming. And so that's going to dictate to some of what ends up happening with cost of living adjustments and things like that. So there's just a lot of really big unknowns right now that we really can't speak to. I think we're being very diligent in starting to think about and anticipate how this is all going to roll out, but we just don't have a lot of information quite yet to share.
I have clients in the construction industry, and so cost of goods is going up and then prevailing wages are going up.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
What
Yeah.
did you guys hear yesterday? I'm hearing a lot is homelessness, and what will that do for cities? I mean, is it a cost that we're gonna have to incur? I mean, state's trying to figure out how to pay for it, but we don't have anything even on that yet, and that could be an added thing that we have to consider and think about as we move forward. But they bring that up yesterday in St. Helens.
Almost every community is working on it. And it sounded like in Tillamook County, it is being coordinated at the county level. And I think that's what makes sense. I mean, there's no single city in Columbia County that can solve this issue. I think it's got to be a county thing. But I think the cities, you know, and Kelly, the new county commissioner, was there. And I said, you know, is this a discussion happening at the county level? And she said, it started, but it really didn't get anywhere. So I think it is maybe up to the cities who are going to have to respond, who are going to have a plan that includes resources maybe provided at a larger scale to push them. So
That was the number one, affordable housing, that was the number one thing that all the mayors talked about down at the Capitol. So they're all.
Okay. Anything else then?
Going back to Dave's,
Yeah,
going back to Dave's question, I think it's a really good idea to develop a fund that carries over for parks year to year. So we have a little bit of a nest egg there that we can rely on in the future.
All right, let's talk about, let's get all the hard ones out of the way. Let's talk about some of the political factors. So a lot of stuff, a lot of things that you might want to think about are just some of the unfunded mandates and other things happening there. Maybe there's some stuff happening regionally, but what political factors do we need to keep in mind as we go into goal setting? Peter?
So we have our buildable land inventory and housing needs analysis back in draft. And there is a need for, we're short 60 acres essentially. And the difference between going through a urban growth, which we had not anticipated we would need an expansion. But the difference between more than 50 acres and less than 50 acres is years. And so the way we can do things is an expansion or a rezone or a combination. And so there are very few expansions that have happened in the last 10 years through the regular process. I did one of them. There have been 5, and it took 4 years.
You said expansion, rezone, or what?
So we can either do an expansion or we can rezone existing land in our urban growth boundary, or we can do a trade of land that is in but underutilized versus land where we could get more, if that makes sense.
And how many acres short?
We're 60 short, and there's an expedited process that's not particularly expedited for less than 50 acres. But the going full bore UGB expansion for 60 acres is not something that would be financially feasible.
What other political things? I mentioned, I put the Paid Leave Act under paid leave stuff under here. What else?
I don't know if this is well, it could be. So the new governor has the 3 goals, and one of the goals that is mental health. And so I thought maybe it can coincide with probably, not that it's mental health equals homelessness, but there is a lot of mental health and so I'm wondering if we can somehow be one of our goals as maybe as a county or a city or a county in order to be able to get that type of funding inward so we can support our community.
So I think there's definitely, the governor's goals don't necessarily have to impact, but I do think there's an executive order around homelessness. Is that right?
There's that law that,
HB.
Yeah.
yeah,
So I mean, there's some of the things that will drive that. I certainly think we'll talk about maybe community needs and stuff when we get into that, but I don't know that the governor's goals would really impact.
Although, if council were to add it, when we talk about liaisons, I know that, I don't think we've had a county liaison in the past, but if council were to add a county liaison, they could interface with the county about those topics. The county's really the one that does social services, not so much the cities. But if you were to interface with them, there might be some kind of collaborative effort there you could pursue.
That may be logical to fall under public health too.
Right.
The county's responsible.
Right, because the county does that. We don't. We're just not, we just don't have the expertise for it.
The one that goes with that too is the House bill regarding the drug enforcement and getting them to call instead of arresting them and getting them to call.
110.
Yeah, they said it's failing and they need to address it. People aren't calling. And so that's going to be a big issue on that. I think it is 110. They're going to address that.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the other service? I know there's one in Portland that instead of sending the police, they
give you a phone number to call for help.
Uh-huh.
And you're supposed to sign up for programs and nobody's calling. And they're not taking advantage. I mean, it's a good idea in theory, they say, but nobody's taking advantage of
So
it.
the public is not taking advantage of it.
This is major 110, that if you get caught in possession of certain unlawful drugs, you get a citation basically and a chance to
remediate, if you will, through calling a number and going through different steps rather than face criminal charges.
And I think the fine is like $25.
Yeah.
The impact to us is that they're funding this program, which is they're taking hundreds of millions of dollars a year for the program, and that used to be, it's cannabis taxes that they're taking, and that used to be money that came to the cities. So they took our share of the cannabis funding, almost all of it, and then put it into this program. And the last stat I got was, I think there were 3 people that called to get rehab. So in the last year.
Out of thousands of citations issued.
And I don't know much about enterprise zones, but do we have to take advantage of our enterprise zone?
Well, the enterprise zone is managed by the Columbia Economic Team. I mean, we take advantage of it in the sense that it's a perk that's offered to people that want to come in and develop in the city. You know, it's a trade-off, right? Because we're giving up our tax base for a certain number of years, for them to have that. We get a little bit back in the form of a betterment fund. That's very limited. So yeah, I mean, we certainly, participate in that, but it's managed by Columbia Economic Team.
Cities were really excited, like that enterprise zone thing, and they're talking about not letting it sunset in 5 years. So I was wondering, is that affecting?
I think it's one of the bigger, economic development incentive tools that we have.
But it doesn't cost us much.
Well, it costs us a lot, because you're foregoing all of your tax revenue on that property. Now, in some instances, because of the way urban renewal was set up, some of the properties that were in that abatement will actually, once they're out of the abatement, will all go into the urban renewal area, which could actually shave years off the urban renewal area because that wasn't originally factored in. But no, I mean, we give up a lot when we incentivize that. And, and I think, there's certain rules that go with it. They have to offer certain benefits, certain wages. There's very specific things to qualify for those programs, but we absolutely give up a lot when we have them.
Other political factors?
I don't know if this is political or where it fits into, but one thing that I've seen as a problem is public education of the funding mechanisms, people not understanding what their taxes are paying or how they're paying for certain services. I'll get complaints that somebody will say, this road is in terrible condition and I pay my taxes. Well, your property taxes don't pay anything for the streets. And so having them educated as to how that all works, I think is key.
How far behind schedule are we, just so we, as a group, know how much to limit our?
So it's almost 1 and we're on.
We have, for this activity, we probably have about 10 minutes left.
Okay.
You have till midnight.
Okay, so misunderstanding of markets tax dollars. What about, any other community needs or organizational trends needs that we would highlight?
Community needs, I think, obviously the Parks and Rec Committee is working on it, but just to support the teens, young adults, the youth, to have some type of rec centers, to have some type of program. That is a plan because there's been complaints of higher, I wouldn't say crime, but higher mischief from that generation or that group of people. And the community is seeking out resources and for the youth.
These goals like engagement, like community.
Just what we're hearing, what you guys are hearing. I asked you in your interviews about, what are some of the needs or what are some of the things you're hearing about? What are the things that are important that we should be thinking about for future goals?
The police department continues to be an issue. I shouldn't say the police department continues to be an issue. The concern or the perception is that we don't have, adequate staffing to meet the community's needs. So just recently, we have some community members forming their own neighborhood watch. And that's, from what I understand and reading the post, as a result of not feeling like we have adequate law enforcement services.
Okay, so just the overall community public safety needs. What else?
Yeah, if we're in a short-term gap, then how do we fill that gap? I mean, yes, we may look at a needs analysis and we're getting there. We have the budget for the whole group. but maybe at this time in history, we're not there. How can we fill that on a short-term basis?
Yeah, what are our options, basically?
I've been hearing this is it's a county problem and also just across the board problem.
State, county, city, yeah.
There's very few agencies in Oregon that are not understaffed.
Right. Yes, Andrew.
I've got to throw this out here because it's my world right now, but every parent, all parents with young children pretty much drive their childcare desert in Scappoose. We basically all drive our kids to St. Helens for childcare, and I think we could support, for one, it would keep dollars in the city versus spending childcare money in St. Helens, and Portland, but just supporting working families.
You know, there's a big childcare meeting on Monday.
I didn't know.
Megan's gonna go, but it's Columbia City or.
Okay.
Yeah, this is one that's not like a direct service the city provides, but it has a really big community impact, and so city may not be a lead, it should certainly consider how partners.
Although we used ARPA money and actually helped get the YMCA after school program going with the school district. It's, it's not run by the city, but we gave them all their startup funds and we really pushed that and organized it and got the school on board. So while no, it's not really something that most cities provide, we have actually been very supportive of trying to increase that resource in the community.
Yeah, that was a big thing that we did last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what else? I haven't heard any organizational trends yet. Or needs, some stuff happening internally that you want the council to be aware of.
The people that are moving to Scappoose now, expect amenities that aren't necessarily supported by our tax base. So like the cost that houses are selling for is attracting, and this is not unique to Scappoose, but when people that have a certain education level and a certain income move into a place, they expect amenities that are more commensurate with cities that might have a higher tax base. And so I think it's really difficult for them to understand why it's not happening here.
At the same time, can we,
Examples? Sorry.
Yeah, so like, if you look at how our property taxes are developed, it was basically frozen in 1985, and then it's 3% a year. And when a house sells, their property tax value doesn't reset based on that valuation. And so if you have a community that was modest means in 1985, it doesn't matter if a house is selling for 500,000, it might still be assessed at like 200. And then the other thing is that prior to measures 5 and 50, which kind of said all this, cities had their tax base, and our tax base is relatively low compared to other cities, including other cities in this county.
Our permanent rate is
Our
low,
permanent rate
and
is low.
also our assessed value within our city limits is a lot less than certain communities. So even though there has been this idea that, well, our community members have a higher than average, income, that's not translating into dollars that it's flowing into the city for us to do more with.
And if you're from a community like a Lake Oswego or Westland, that you're just accustomed to like certain levels of parks and other things like that, you'll think, well, the house that I just bought, $700,000, why don't we have these parks? And, the answer is because both our permanent base is low and we're capturing more on new housing. So it's like new as compared to traditional, the new are paying like up to 4 times what the traditional are paying, but we're not capturing the amount of money that someone with an advanced degree necessarily expects, and we're not able to provide this sort of amenities that some other cities are able to provide.
What percentage are we talking, difference or money?
Like our
Well,
fixed,
so
our fixed base was half of the city of Moala's.
Right, so like for example, so we're at $3.26 per thousand, I believe it was, or $3.22. Like Beaverton, for instance, is at like $4.60 per thousand. There's cities that are at up to $6 per thousand. So that's just, it's not a lot of money.
does it ever reset?
No, it does not. It's permanent. It's
Unless there's a change in state law that would reset the value at the point of purchase.
So essentially, when those laws went into place, if you were lucky and you had a higher rate, you lucked out and you kept that higher rate. If it was low, you're low and you're stuck there. You're from.
So how cities sometimes make it up, because we have to move on past this point, just understand that you have a very low tax rate.
Yes.
And that it does not equate to the services that your community demands. How some cities make it up is they'll approve an operating levy.
Right.
Like and they have to go back out to voters like
Every 5
or
years.
something. They have to make it up in different ways. And so it has its repercussions too.
And there's no advocacy opportunity like through League of Oregon Cities to
It's
kind of
permanent.
rectify
It's,
this?
as far as I understand it, it's like,
It would take a constitutional
Yeah.
change.
it's in the
They
Constitution,
actually, yeah.
which requires
I
double
mean,
majority
they
vote.
got as close to setting it in stone as they could.
Kind of for an organizational need. So in the Community Development Center, we have very few staff and, we're under strict guidelines from the state for how quickly we process land use applications. So one of the things council and the planning commissioners will be hearing about as we move through the 50-year plan is looking at streamlining processes in the planning department specifically. So one of the things that will be considered as part of the development code updates that we do is, do we still want to require all site development review applications to be reviewed by the planning commission? Or is there an interest in having some of those, if it's an outright permitted use, be admin level approval so that we're getting to development quicker instead of holding up the process. And it's not to say that we are now, it's just that was always the way that the city chose to approve site development review applications, which is our most common type of application, I would say we process. And so any type of new, development that's proposed, certainly if it's commercial or light industrial, all of those go to planning commission for approval, whereas in some jurisdictions, if it's outright permitted, there's not this need or desire to have the planning commission weigh in on that. That does add an extra, 8 weeks potentially to getting to a decision. So we have opportunity to streamline. It's just a matter of, is there appetite in the community for that? And is there appetite from the council? It does equate to real savings to the developer to be able to then not have carrying costs on the land while they're trying to get through their entitlement process. That's not to say, and there's lots of caveats around land use. That's not to say if it were a discretionary decision, like a variance or something like that, that would just be a staff level decision. I'm talking about things that are outright permitted and there's really not a lot of discretion. Does it make sense then to have the planning commission look at it if there's no discretion? So like I said, in most jurisdictions, it doesn't go to planning commission in a lot of cases where there's no discretion. And is that something we want or not want? But that's something we'll be looking at.
May I ask a question on that? So you're saying as it currently stands, things that the planning commission don't actually have discretion on are still going to planning commission to
Yes.
review?
Yes.
Why would we do that?
That was always the way it was done here and required.
Kind of an evolution you see happen as cities grow.
So you don't have any say in this, but go ahead and look at it anyway.
Yes, that's basically, but that's what we're talking about though. And we have been pretty aggressively looking at ways where we can do process improvements internally.
I think traditionally, but to answer Tyler's question, I think in the past, and I wasn't here, so I can't say for sure why they've always kept this in this process this way, but I think there was this sense that they wanted as much community input into every decision. I mean, it was until like the last, 8 years, maybe 10 years ago, that every tree removal permit went to the planning commission. I mean, we're talking like a high level of review. That's just not, to prepare a staff report for the planning commission is quite a bit of work. And so does it make sense from a staff perspective if we know going into it, every condition's already been met? And again, I'm not talking about things like discretionary approvals like a zone change or an overlay. That's totally different and that would always go through planning commission.
Land development.
totally different. That's
Yeah,
not what I'm,
it's
I'm
different.
talking
It's
about
like,
things.
this is about organizational modernization.
That's
Right.
exactly right. And so I think it's just been this perception that the planning commission gets to see everything. But if there is no discretion, and I've asked this my whole time as well, why are we taking this in? Like, it's costing so much staff time. And with the limited staff, we need to be really careful with our time.
And this state continues to take away the ability for communities to say no. So there's still things where the community can absolutely say no to the plans. But every time they revise our land use laws, they're eroding that ability for a community to basically say no. So more and more stuff is by right, like they're just straight up entitled to it. And that's this sort of where all the criteria is clear and objective. These are bright line rules. They're not like they're that should that go to a body that can't say no.
Right.
And then the other thing is the body knows they can't say no and people are adamantly opposed to it. And it kind of turns into a toxic meeting because the public doesn't understand if we don't want this, why don't you just say no? And again, these aren't like planned unit developments we just dealt with. These are ones that are just like straight up by right. They check every box.
Like a new O'Reilly's, like when the O'Reilly's went in, right? Like limited land use decision, we don't really get to say it met all the criteria. We have an obligation as the city to approve it. If we don't approve it, we'll get sued by the applicant.
Right.
Why does, if they're meeting everything and we've just drug the process out by 6 weeks so the planning commission can say yes, does that make sense?
Well, and is it fair to force them to say yes if they can't say no?
Yeah, okay, so I think we get the point of this.
Yeah.
This is a modernization thing. You guys could debate it later, but so just to wrap this part up, I'm just gonna look to Alex and any other major things that we're missing on here that we need the team to be thinking about as we shift into setting process.
No. I think it's a muscle,
Okay. All right, so the goal setting process, let's talk about what this is gonna look like. You guys have, in your packets, and I think some of you may have looked at this ahead of them too, a worksheet with the current goals and the updates on those. And there's some things that are highlighted, that are recommended for removal. Some of those things have been completed. There's also some things that have been flagged, in yellow for modification. So, or I would say refinement. So those are the things that we want you guys to consider some refinement proposals on. And then staff also took a look as far as things that should be considered for proposals for additions. So I want Alex and her team to kind of talk through some of the highlights of this quickly. And then how this is going to work is I'm going to put you guys into small groups. And we're going to give each small group an assignment for a goal area to work on some of those items that need refinement. And then to have discussion around the things for proposals. And then if there's anything missing, I want you to use like the remainder of your time in your small groups. And you don't have to, obviously I'm going to give you assignments from the existing goal areas, but you don't have to stay limited to that. If there's stuff that's not represented under these existing goal areas, but you just have an idea that you want to make sure it comes forward, I want you guys to capture that as well. I'll give you some more specific instructions right before I put you in your groups, but just so that you understand, we're not just doing goal setting that's starting from scratch. You already have some stuff that's happening. So this is a goal refinement exercise. So thinking about what do we need to change? What do we need to add to give staff some clear direction? There are some things that maybe I might flag this as you guys talk about it, but there's some, I want you to think about these as Alex and her team go through them. As far as, is it measurable? So there's a couple items in this first group one, as far as like 1.6, continue to support OMIC's expansion. How do you measure that? How would you ever report success on that? So I want you to think that's really squishy. So I want you to think about maybe be a little more specific. Or if it's just like a general advocacy thing, you guys maybe don't need that as an objective. Maybe that's just something, it's more of like a value thing, like we support economic development type stuff. There's another one on here about promote and support small local business. That is certainly a really worthy effort, but how do you measure that? So if there's something specific that you want to be done and that you want to give staff direction on, I think that would be more valuable for them. And I think the results of it and reporting progress would be more meaningful for you in a year. Okay? All right, all that said, let's run through some updates so then we can get you guys in your small groups and you can start talking about this.
So goal updates, I know we're a little behind schedule, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. Essentially, the goal updates that are in your packets are the same update you were all presented on January 3rd. I think there's obviously been some progress since then. It's been a month, but not a ton that would have necessitated an update to this. So this has already been, presented to you. The department heads were available for questions. There's really no changes. So
Okay.
just in terms of, in the interest of saving some time,
Great.
I don't know that we really need to go over more than that.
Go over more than that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so how this will work in your small groups then? You guys have your Post-its, and so again, I would please do one idea per Post-it so that as we start to map these out on the board, I can move them around. If you start creating lists on the Post-its and we decide that we're gonna assign something to a different goal area as it gets been refined and it doesn't really fit, or we're creating a new one, it makes it really hard to do the exercise if you do. So it's like, this is your very teacher type A instructions, please, one idea per Post-it. If you have a shortage, there's some right here. Write big so your colleagues can see what you're putting up, or so that I can read it. How the small groups are gonna work, we've got group 1, who will be Pete, Lori, Kim, Isaac, and Carol. And you guys are assigned goal 1 around the develop a vibrant and diverse local economy, and goal 2, enhance community livability. So those are your assignments, and everybody will get the chance to comment, but again, we would be here until tomorrow if we didn't like divide and conquer here. So group 2 is gonna be Tyler, Jeanette, Peter, Stephen, and Joe. And you guys are gonna work on public safety. That's a pretty meaty one, so you guys get that one assignment. And then we have group 3, which includes everybody else, and hopefully I have everybody's name listed here, but Megan, Andrew, Alex, Chris, and Dave. And you guys are going to work on goal 4 and goal 5, so parks and construction. You can gather in this space. You can gather, like, you wanna go out to the hallway or something, whatever works best for you all. Be comfortable, have some discussions in your group. I will rotate around and see if you have any questions or need any support, but you're working on areas for refinement, proposals, brainstorming for any new ideas. Okay? Time, let's start with 30 minutes, and as I work around to your groups, I'll kind of see how you're doing, if we need more time, or if we need to make any adjustments. My watch thinks I want to start working, so that means the real work is starting, so go, where you guys disperse in your group.
and she kept us focused, so.
Good. We like to hear. All right, Kim, tell us.
So we agreed that 1.1 and 1.2 could be dropped as an official goal, and that is not an indication of, how it would continue to be supported by staff or the administrations of the programs. 1.3, we agree with changing identify process for community branding, but we would like to get some milestones behind that, like what that means for this year.
Okay.
And that means, first of all, educating us, like what is the power of a brand? What can a brand do for a community? So we can make some informed decisions around this.
Okay.
And then figuring out things like what type of budget would be required and getting all the way to really kind of scoping the work out so that we have an RFP ready to go.
Okay.
We think it makes sense, but also looking at like how to put 50-year plan and all that, but just getting everything lined up that we can next year.
Okay.
Can I add one thing on that? I heard CET is doing a branding program, I think, through with consultants, everything for the county. So it'd be good to just see what they're doing as well.
Okay, so consider
One other thing on that, Isaac, I'm wondering if we should wait to have Dan do his thing until we've got a little more direction for him. I mean,
I think,
Well, I don't think anything with Dan would actually conflict with this plan at all. What we'd have Dan do is Dan's essentially just agreed to volunteer about 3 hours of his time. He'd meet with staff for an hour, he'd meet with the Economic Development Committee for an hour, and then he'd meet with council for an hour to help us put together an RFP. So he would actually be helping
with some of those.
with a lot of what they just
he's not going to
described.
just sit down and draw
No.
a picture.
No,
No. It would help
So
cost.
he's already actually, essentially offering to help us work through the process they just outlined.
I didn't understand that.
Okay. Now we're at 1.4.
At 1.4, no change. 1.5, we're just changing from in progress. Based on Lori's suggestion, 1.6, 1.7, no change.
1.4, 1.6, 1.7, all of those.
Then,
You've got 1.5.
for CEP first.
The change was.
So that's
just
the
wording.
change.
Accepted.
Yeah.
Yeah, so agreeing with the wording change.
Okay. All right, 1.6 and 1.7, again, I just question, are these things measurable? Did you guys have any conversation about that?
So.
Well, I think 1.7 could be measurable in that, we have a small local business spotlight in our newsletter each month, so we can track and make sure that we're getting that in. But as far as like,
I know, but do you need that as,
I don't-
if it's
I
not, so I challenge groups
yeah.
on putting stuff in, if it's already operational, or if you're already doing it. It just, what happens is it takes away from the focus of the rest of the goals. And it's like, you really want to zero in on like, what are the key things we are actually trying to achieve versus like, yeah, we've been doing this, it's not going, we're gonna keep doing it. Like, that's just business as usual.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Did we ever do follow-up with the businesses that are spotlighted to see like if there's an impact? They're like, do we ever measure the successfulness of our efforts?
I think the easy way to measure that is when you have them.
All right, hold on, I wanna, again, the microphone's gonna pick up the side conversation, so hate to cut off good conversation, but you guys are, it's gonna sound very weird.
We haven't in the past because it's hard to measure business increase when you don't have something to base it off of. So typically, if you're gonna do that, you look at things like providing a coupon or a discount code or just have them. But none of the businesses that we've offered that to have taken that up. So it's really hard to ask them to start counting customers through the door over the next week. And so we haven't been able to do that because nobody's made a business, like a coupon or something that we could track and say, how many coupons did you get?
So maybe for things like that, could we maybe leave a placeholder where like if an obvious metric like reveals itself, we could
Are
add,
we keeping that goal or is it going what?
oh, keeping the goal. Oh, wait, which one?
1.7.
1.7 is staying, but no change.
Well, I guess.
thought that was the conversation we were just having.
Challenging the group to have some discussion on. So the small group is proposing no change, but the council as a whole, you guys have to, there has to be a majority or consensus on this. And so that is, all the goal areas that have stuff like this, I'm gonna challenge. So and again, it's because when you come back in a year, there's not gonna be any metric to like be able to
It's
be
very
like, oh,
non-specific.
this was, This has been successful. Has it been successful? We don't really know.
So what we've done in the past is when we fill out our action plans at the end of the year, we'll document kind of what we did, you know, to accomplish this goal. So there's not metrics per se, but it's just kind of a statement about what happened. Now, that doesn't change much year over year because it's the same things. It does become a little bit of busy work if we're just filling these action plans out with the same
Right.
stuff every year, so.
I think that's
Again,
what she's
yeah, I'm
saying.
asking, is it meaningful? So I can see Megan's hand, and then, so let's hear from some of the other councils.
I think there's a difference between accomplish and address. And I think if you're accomplishing a goal, you can cross it off. You can address a goal and you can continue to address like an initiative, but I think we're looking for goals that we can meet. It's done and you cross it off the list. So I am in favor of removing several of these goals under this goal list for the purpose of not ever being able to cross it off the list. I don't know if this group looked at the EDC's recommendations, the Economic Development Committee's recommendations, but I felt like they provided some that were a little more explicit that I would like to see in this section.
Okay, let's talk about those in a second. I want to deal with some of these others. Any other thoughts on how to address 1.6 and 1.7? To just make it a little more specific about what the council wants to see here.
Yeah, I agree with Megan, but also I also think that there's other groups that are addressing this, which is Buy Local and CCET. And so maybe it can be more clear on maybe sharing that social media or more specific like that. But I think those groups are already kind of working on that, on promoting and supporting local businesses, if that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'm just asking, what is the city's, what's the specific direction? Thoughts over here?
Just after hearing your comments, I'm not sure we need 1.6 at all. I know that that's really a measurable goal. It's something that we do as part of what the city does. We support our comrades in arms, so to speak, and OMIC is one of those. And we can say that we support the school district, we support,
Right.
I'm not sure we need that. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm kind of,
Tyler?
I'm kind of getting the feeling that anytime there's the word continue in front of these, it's like, how is it ever going to be measurable? It seems like it's something that's already been accomplished if the word continues in there. So, I don't think, based on what I'm hearing so far, I don't think that we need 1.6.
I was trying to think of measurables in that and support. And I thought of, okay, we develop tours, we help promote tours, we give them money to build stuff, or we put them in the newsletter, we help market them as ways of measurables that we're helping support it.
Yeah, so marketing is something I would say is more specific than we're just supporting it or we're promoting it. I don't know. If there's like a specific marketing target that you guys want to reach, then let's talk about, I'm encouraging you to be more specific. If you really want to leave it general, they're your goals, but it doesn't give staff very solid direction. You're going to end up with a checklist, probably very similar to what they've done in the past.
It's sounding like 6 and 7 are somewhat similar. And so I like the word you used, market. And could we just say market local business?
And what is that? And then what's the outcome? How, or what do you want to see at the end of the year?
Sorry.
And I'm looking to Isaac because I know.
Yeah.
Like, what would be helpful direction?
If you want, we'd be looking for things like a number of businesses, do so many small business spotlights, hit so many social media posts, or like really specific numbers, because you know what we do in terms of outreach. We tell you all the time how we do it, but like saying we want to see 4 businesses spotlight. We want to see, social media posts a month or 3 social media posts a month or an ad campaign leading up to Small Business Saturday or something like that. Like those would be things we could take and actually implement and say, yes, we check these boxes and would be.
And be able to
measure.
provide meaningful feedback.
That sounds like a lot of things in there. So would we break them down into 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9?
No, I don't think I think it
Okay.
could be more, but I think something that's not too in the weeds, but to Isaac's point, it's like maybe there's a marketing campaign is developed leading up to Small Business Saturday. Would probably, I think, give pretty solid direction.
That's something that's new. We don't do those things yet.
I think you kind of just answered my question, because if we're going to get into defining all of the elements of each one of these, we're going to be here a really long time. And there are, things that are really important under each of these, but I'm just wondering how we constructively dissect each of these in the time that we have. I think you just answered my question, that it's more of just saying, develop a marketing plan rather than the specific details of we do X number of businesses, we do X number of social media posts. I'm just trying to delineate a little bit. in
Yeah,
between
I'm
the
gonna
two
help,
here.
yes, I'm gonna help guide you guys through it, but that is, it's like, what is the action that you're gonna see at the end of the year? And maybe it's some quarterly, like quarterly marketing directed towards small business and a campaign leading up to Small Business Saturday.
We were under the understanding that the measurable objectives would be developed by staff. We were kind of looking at the bigger picture on things.
Yeah, and some of them will, but on these ones that are squishy,
That's
where you're
why-
not giving like very solid direction, then that's the ones where I'm gonna
That's
dig
why I
in.
think it should just be eliminated.
Okay, so let's kind of just do a general polling. Would you guys prefer to see something, or prefer to see 1.6 eliminated?
I guess the only thing I would throw in is the optics of the politics of dropping them from an explicit goal. Is there any consequence of that?
Well, just from staff input, because this is one of mine. We do this every day anyway.
It's general practice.
And here we are sending it and we support them. Yeah, we support them, absolutely, every day.
They're established partners at this
They're
point.
established partners. Yeah.
Okay, so again, just to move this along, can I just see a show of hands of who's okay with taking this one off the list this year? 1, 2, 3, all right, we're good, we're gonna remove it. What about 1.7? I'm gonna pull first for removing it. If there's not enough, then we're gonna talk about how you wanna reframe it. Any thoughts on, or anybody like wanting to remove 1.7?
I do have a comment though, because I think it's important to have discussion before we get to that question. I thought we were gonna rephrase that to be support marketing.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
I was seeing some like mixed emotions originally about reframing it versus removing it, so I wasn't sure. I didn't want to have the let's reframe discussion if there's a majority of folks who just want to remove it.
I think it's too vague. And then the marketing piece starts to get into 1.5, isn't it? Already talking about.
Yeah, I mean, we're already.
Yeah, so for 1.5, you guys could, you've changed it to ongoing, but maybe we just put some notes in the column here, some specific direction about support for small business and some of the things you mentioned. How do you guys feel about that? Does that sound?
So 1.5 would be reworded to include small business specifically.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm for removing 1.7.
Okay. The 1.4 is staying as is, 1.6 and 1.7 are coming off. This is what we're gonna add small business to 1.5. And then you've got 1.8. So support CET tourism efforts. Staff recommends reworded to be more specific. So is support CET tourism efforts specific enough?
Well, I guess what we were getting at was if there wanted to be a continued goal that referenced tourism, that it made more sense to support the primary agency or, group in the county that was working on those efforts. It's not really something that we do, generally speaking.
Okay, yeah, so this is where I try to help groups like refine it down.
Yeah, so
So by supporting, there's
So
a
we-
liaison,
we
there's
can,
funding.
yeah, so we can attend meetings, we can help provide information that they would need if they think that something like that we have is marketable, like for instance, the CZ Trail or Chapman Landing, that we can provide information to them, but there's not really the capacity on our end to be, heavily focused on tourism.
Other conversation on this?
So could it just be that we have a CET liaison and that we get updates on? I'm trying to.
I'm on
Trying to
the
do-
board.
Oh, okay.
Supported.
That's right.
Be happy to.
So that's why we just felt like if it was more specific to at least supporting CET or something to that effect, that made more sense if it stays on at all, but that's.
Is it important that it stays on, Megan?
I don't think it's important to stay on unless supporting comes with some sort of financial
It
does.
can,
Will we pay to be?
well, yeah, but we're set members. That's not really, that has a, that's like, yeah, neither here nor there. That's kind of a separate thing. It's possible that some of the tourism efforts could come with grant dollars eventually down the line. And if Paul Vogt calls me and says, hey, you know, we have this opportunity, of course, we're gonna,
Yeah.
you know, we're gonna do support, we're gonna do letters of support, we're gonna do everything we can. We're very collaborative that way. We meet with him once a month as it is. But I don't, you know, I don't know that this needs to be on there separately.
Any in favor of taking it off? Oh, yeah, I'm seeing a majority. Again, it's just having some of this stuff not on the list helps you to really amplify and focus what is on the list.
So my only concern with that is, though, is in the past, we've repeatedly been told that these are the things that staff is gonna work on and no other things. I just want to get it on the record that what if, I mean, Alex kind of talked about it a little bit, you know, if Paul calls and asks for something, you're still gonna help him, but I just want to make sure that we are all on the same page about if things come up related to these topics, or are we just like, oh, no, not on our goal list?
No, we never do that. I mean, it's, like I said, it's a lot of, it's just a lot of this stuff we are already doing. It's kind of baked into the cake, so to speak. Like it's, you know,
You guys are
we identified it years back. Yeah, we're members of SET. We meet with Paul once a month to talk about economic development. I even had a recent email with him talking about some of this tourism stuff and how, I know Lori, you talked about being more involved now that you have an associate planner and you're the community development director, that seemed to fall well within your purview. So this stuff is happening. It's just, it's not like because it's not on this list, it's not happening. There's so much that happens that isn't on the list.
So this goal came about because I think it was like 2017 or 2018, Travel Oregon reached out to me and was like, we really wish Columbia County could like have it as a unit, could apply for some larger grants, and we view opportunities there. And then they essentially tried to use me as a mediator where I wasn't representing anyone, but to try and mediate between St. Helens, which has hotels, and the rest of the county. And that did not go the way that Travel Oregon was hoping. And so at that point, they partnered with the CET just as kind of an entity that could potentially get grants. And so like, if there was a countywide desire to really look into tourism, then that could be something that our staff could work on. It's just like in the past, the community's not been able to get, the different cities and county have not been able to get together. So this was kind of like, we thought things were going in one way. It didn't go that way at all. CET came in as a Band-Aid organization to fulfill a specific task, which is to apply for grants.
Right, and all the money flows through them.
Yeah, and the money flows through them because there is no tourism.
Yeah.
So I kind of share the same concern though, right? Like, I feel like these efforts should somewhere be memorialized. Is it possible to take them out of goals and create kind of like a parking lot for ongoing work where we identify the work streams that we still want staff to be working on, but it's kind of
And then, yeah, no, I agree too, because it's significant that, that we're working on this. And then I guess from staff's perspective, I guess my concern would be if we take a bunch of these off, but that we are actually still working on, that it appears as though we have this, massive amount of time to now take on new goals, when in reality, we're still working on all of these. So that would just be the counterbalance, I guess, to taking them off, to just keeping them.
So how I see this work is staff develops their work plans following council goals. So that would show up in like community development's work plan, like these are regional groups that we work with on a regular basis, part of our regular work. And we support, that should end up. And you guys should get reports on it when you get reports from your departments, which it sounds like that happens as part of for some regular department updates.
Do we not have just support CET? I mean,
It's just not, you can have it. I'm just telling you, it's not meant.
there's, yeah, I go to every meeting, we pay every month, we pay money, we pay dues. They came up with a program for a tourism effect. We got on board with that program. I mean, are there goals, are measurables?
Megan, saw a hand up from you too.
I just think that there are 20 other things that Lori does during the day that could be on this list and they're not. We don't know, I agree that if it's not measurable, again, like we support the senior center. What does that look like? We support the school district, you know, we support the library. I mean, there's a lot of other things that could be added to the list. This just happened to be one that was added because of the timing that we needed it to be focused, staff to focus on, but it's not a focus for staff right now. It's handled. So I think
So again, I just want to, you guys can leave it on if you want, but it needs to be supported by the majority, something that staff's going to spend time reporting to on a more regular basis as at a goal level versus like just operational. So again, can I just see if there's enough support to leave this on the list? Okay, then it's going to come off the list and be part of Lori's work plan. Okay.
Usually our work plans actually are council goals. So
Well-
we might need to work in another one that's
Yeah, so
ongoing
like
stuff.
ongoing core service type stuff that you guys just do and you're partnering with the street. All right, any other proposals for like economic development stuff? Any brainstorming stuff that came up in your groups? All right, let's shift to goal 2 right now, which was around community livability. Okay, Kim, tell us what you guys have for community livability.
Yeah, so we agreed, the rail corridor study is completed, that can be dropped off. 2.1. We agree with the change of language to continue to develop the 50-year plan. I guess we just measure that through the progress of the
Deliverable, committee meeting.
yeah. So 2.3, we are proposing that one to focus exclusively on promoting Adventure Fest because we think there are very specific timelines, and goals that can be developed around that. And then we'd like the other community events like Earth Day, Movies in the Park, and that to fall under 2.6 and be worked into the larger,
You're gonna have one for that.
continue community. Yeah, and then as a measurable for that, tracking the outreach impact. We can just do with internet metrics or social media. So circling back to 2.5, I guess these meetings can take up a lot of time in the work sessions. So we are proposing that maybe we identify 3 key stakeholders for each year and kind of chart those meetings into our 2023 timeline. And then if there are other stakeholders that we want to be open to discussions with, we can let them know that, you know, a council representative can come to their meeting, or, you know, we can maybe entertain a specific request for a meeting. But maybe kind of being very targeted and specific with those one-on-ones.
Thinking the school district meeting's the same night as ours.
No. Second Mondays.
We can go to them instead.
I don't know how I feel about that, because all of these are really important community partners. I mean, maybe some of them become optional, and I mean, are there ones that are more important to council than others? I mean, these are typically the 1-hour work sessions before council, right? So, and not all of these people participate. These are just more goals of agencies that we want to try to interface with annually, right?
I mean, I reached out to all of them specifically. It was on there to reach out. So we reached out to everyone and tried to schedule each and every one. Some of them came before council multiple times for other things as well. Some of them just didn't have time, schedules didn't align. And I mean, I kind of suggested paring it down just because I thought that year by year, there might be groups that were more important to talk to than others.
Well, and to that point too, I mean, we do have liaisons for each of these too, so it could just be an issue of the liaison coming back and letting council know that we want to have a meeting, and then we schedule it based on need rather than,
Oh, just automatically.
yeah.
That would help with
Hold
timing.
on, Megan's had her hand up for a while.
Sorry.
I agreed with Kim in the group. I had some notes here. I think that we could narrow down the list based upon when we're done today. If there are any goals that speak to those certain agencies, that those would be the priorities of our meetings. So if, you know, something with economy or CET or something, that would be a priority to have them interact with us, or if there is something specific up here about another agency, that those would be the top priorities for the work sessions, that these goals in the end will determine who we choose to see in that year.
So based on, it's more, I think Tyler, you were starting to say this too, it's more based on need.
Yeah, so I mean, I like that idea, but now as I think about this more and hear more dialogue about it, if we have liaisons assigned to each one of these, I feel like it's the liaison's responsibility to know when all of council needs to have a meeting with that third-party agency too. So there's two options here as I see it, basically that we do what's recommended, or what you guys have said, what's recommended, or we back off completely and realize that we have liaisons tied to these, and that we leave it to the liaisons to communicate in between, and we schedule meetings as needed, I guess is the way to summarize it.
But the liaisons be staff and council, or is just, I guess I'm defining liaisons. Because there's 6 of us and we already have other committees that we belong to. Some of them already go to these types of meetings. So I'm just wondering what consider liaison.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, you guys have council liaisons for these groups, and then maybe in some instances, there's also staff support.
Well, what I would say for staff is that anytime there's any kind of project or discussion we think needs to take place, we schedule those. I mean, that's just kind of a given. If it makes sense with our workflow, or someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to talk to your council about something, we schedule that. So we're certainly interfacing with agency heads in a way that would facilitate that. I think Councilor Miller's talking more about, the liaison roles in terms of, yes, there's existing liaison appointments, but do you want to switch any of those up, maybe to absorb some of these? And is it, is council bringing back feedback like, hey, this is what's happening at these meetings. Can you please put this on an upcoming agenda?
Okay. So I'm hearing that, like, not doing these annual meetings, you guys can just do away with this practice and base it on, I think that's a hybrid. It's like project need. And it sounds like that happens, as well as as the liaisons identify there's a need.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, though, is that everybody that is appointed to be a liaison realizes the importance that they play, and that they are going to those meetings, because this will cause a greater reliance on the liaisons to bring back information to council.
I think that gets away from the purpose of doing this in the first place. My thought on it anyway, that it is a communication tool, but it's also an opportunity to be face to face with these other boards. And, I don't know if I could tell you without having these meetings, who are on those boards. And I think there's something to be said for that, not for every board, but for the key ones, like the school district and the fire board and maybe the county. But I just think it's important that we, at some point, meet these people face to face. And the liaison does not necessarily, do we have a liaison to the fire department? I don't think we do we?
That's what I'm saying. It seemed like there was a desire to revisit that list, and maybe change that up, but no.
Okay, so now I'm kind of hearing another option.
I think we should keep.
It's like revisit the list to figure out maybe where there's not a liaison role and there would be a need for coordination. Identify how the whole list like necessitates, or project list necessitates a need to connect with folks. And then where you don't maybe have a specific one, maybe putting that as assigning that as like the liaison's role to bring forth the need. But
I do hear you, Pete. I think we learn a lot by we never interacted with those groups, and then now we have, and now we know so much more about them, and they know more about us. I think a lot of partnerships came from having this on our list. I think now just listening to Sarah talking about, actionables and what we're focused on, and Alex's take on, work sessions are really filling up. Staff has so much to give to us during work sessions that we're running out of room to have, 8 different agencies coming before us, throughout the year, that we just have to be mindful about how we're using our time. Not that I don't want to, yeah.
I'm not hung up on either way, really.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not a big deal.
The other thing I want to just throw out really quick too is that as electeds, our interfacing is usually done with other electeds, so boards. So if there's things on here that are more executive to executive, then that is where I would envision that city management and city administration is interfacing with those positions. For like example, OMIC, does OMIC have a board? They're not elected officials, so that would be an example of what I'm talking about here, where staff would interface with their staff opposed to electeds trying to interface with staff.
Right.
Right, can we, I feel like we've got some other really meaty topics that are gonna come up, so this one, I feel like we need to close the loop and get some agreement or consensus on how you guys want to move forward.
One was one-on-one meetings with neighboring local leaders as needed.
Okay, so as needed,
I mean, yeah, and we could ask for a yearly report from them that we could read on our own if we aren't seeing them that year. Because you call somebody in July, they may not have anything going on, but they really need to talk to you in November. And if you need them, then you bring them in as needed.
Well, I think that's a lot of what we've been discussing is that if it's on an as needed basis, that would be identified by a combination of council liaisons and staff.
okay, so then the
For
proposed,
projects.
the proposed objective would be, connecting with partners. Or however you want to capture them, partners
On an as needed
on an
basis.
as-needed basis.
The point is, it's not really a goal though.
Yeah, I keep moving back to the,
Let
yeah,
them,
it's not, I
like-
mean, we're gonna do this anyway.
You guys okay with removing it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Lori. Okay, last one. So-
Support the senior center. We think there's an opportunity to really increase the visibility of the community and senior center aspect.
Okay.
Maybe update the directional signs to reflect that and any other kind of promotion of the community events that would be broadly appealing to the
I can neither confirm or deny that the word community will stay in the community and senior center. So I would not like that written that way on the goal. And I would like that, if we're increasing the visibility, one thing on here about supporting the senior center is we have financially contributed to them. So I would like the goal to be a little more specific. We increase the visibility by having them in the newsletter. We've gone above and beyond recently with the senior center, but if we're supporting them financially, I think that needs to be listed as a goal, financially support the senior center. If we're not going to do that, then I don't think it should be a goal, but I think there's some things to unpack in that.
Okay, other thoughts from the council on this?
I think it's a good idea.
The state to financially support the senior center?
That we include that there.
Peter?
So is that going to be through our grant program or is that going to be some sort of fixed amount? Because I think that's kind of a key question.
My goal is to come up with another fixed amount plus the grant. But like I said, I have not had much of a chance to dig into the budget yet, but that is my goal.
Alex, would that be a goal for this coming year? Like, because you're saying that the budget's tight already. I'm just wondering.
You're projecting it's gonna be tight, yes.
So I'm just wondering, maybe future, you can't do it.
I will try for this fiscal year. That's my goal.
Megan?
I think that this is a tricky goal. They're in a transitional phase, and some of the old practices that we were aware of and concerned about, unfortunately, have come to light that might still be continuing, and we might not, as a council, choose to support them financially based upon how they're conducting business. So I think that's a really tricky goal to have on there.
I think leaving it as is could be fine. And then
Support the senior center.
yeah, and then that would be the goal going forward.
We support them in a variety of ways.
We do,
We
'cause we-
support them with
Right.
legal.
Yeah, let's hear from others on the council on this one.
I think bingo night will support it financially, but we'll have city bingo night.
I have some concerns. I had some concerns. I had talked to staff about those. We didn't really see a lane to go in. And then there were some letters and then the AG came in and provided a lot of clarity, frankly, 18 pages of clarity. I think that the AG had some clear expectations as far as best practices and what would happen. I think some of those things have occurred. I think some of those things have not necessarily occurred, and there frankly is, I think that people can be well-meaning, but also not have systems in place in order to ensure that what's happened in the past doesn't happen in the future. And that ultimately, it's really hard for us to require that an organization, I mean, I don't want to dictate what an organization does, but all of your fiduciaries, and I think it's that, I think that it's, I mean, from a legal risk perspective, my thoughts are kind of like, let's wait and see, and hopefully the progress will continue. But we had a meeting where I heard some things that made me a bit uncomfortable.
Okay, so given that context, I just want to hear from the rest of the council where you guys are on this. Tyler?
So I think this kind of goes back to our liaisons to support the senior center is a very broad term. I think it'd be prudent to have whoever the liaison is with the senior center keep council up to date on what the senior center's needs are, where their funding gaps are, what their needs are basically. And then we do that on a case by case basis. I just don't know that it needs to be a goal.
Okay, again, we're gonna be brief in our comments here. Jeanette, where are you on this?
Yeah, I don't think it should be a goal. I think it should be part of, like Tyler said, like a liaison information. I'm not familiar with what's going on, but I don't think that we should, I think, yeah, we should take it off.
Correct. Andrew?
Like Megan said earlier, like we support the library, we support the schools, we support, I don't think we need it. Implied.
Kim, I'm hearing, I think there's a majority who wants to take it off. Kim, any additional thoughts from you before we?
Yeah, again, as long as, as these fall off the list of goals, as long as they're not falling off our areas of focus.
Yeah, it sounds like there's still.
Yeah, I'm still working on it.
You guys are still working on it.
Can I say something? I just want to be clear again, because we're on the record on this. We're not taking away our support by removing these. We're simply rearranging how we support these different organizations in a more efficient way with probably more streamlined information.
Yeah, this is your process just maturing a bit. To help provide, I heard in the interviews, there was a call for more measurable results and more clarity. So I'm intentionally being like, trying to help you dig into that so that you walk away with that as your outcome. If you desire something different, then we need to, during the break, we should talk about that. All right, so we're 2 goals in. Why don't we let's take 7 minutes and then come back and we'll pick up with public safety.
Oh, real quick.
Yes.
We actually talked to this group about moving 2.4 to the number 5, to goal 5.
Oh, okay, all right.
Because I feel like it's more of an infrastructure thing. So just if you need to make a note of that,
On 2.4?
yeah, we were keeping it, but we were moving it over to 5.
All
I
right.
can present it to you because we
Yeah.
took it.
But if you needed to make a note there,
Yeah, I'll make it.
yeah.
Glad we gave it up, didn't we? That's yours. Didn't have to ask twice on that one.
It did.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about public safety. You guys have been doing a lot. You've hired some public safety rock stars, right? So now what's next? Where are we on public safety? What are our groups?
We had a cover.
Yeah, I know. You guys probably could have taken a long time. Tell me, what was 3.1?
I think we're right in the middle of that from what we understand, she's got chiefs out getting some information and bringing back some information. So that one's kind of ongoing or in progress. And based on their analysis, that will determine, I guess, our goal, or not our goals, but what direction we need to, it kind of spurred on another one. I think the operation needs analysis, maintain sufficient staffing levels is kind of is a long-term thing.
Okay.
Let's,
Is the needs analysis done yet?
So it's in progress.
It's in progress. Okay, so that piece is definitely ongoing. And then,
well, kind of spurred, but maybe it's 3.6 is in the interim. We kind of agree that there are some short-term staffing issues. So develop a public safety work group. Maybe it's a 3.1 and 2, but 3.6 is what we tabled it. I can get to that at the end.
just while we're on it, just tell me about it.
Develop a public safety work group to address current staffing levels and short-term solutions.
What is a work group?
2 people and a chief and the city manager and maybe me and a counselor, just going over current staffing issues right now. Identify if we have any weak links or any shortages, and what are our potential solutions to fill those in the short term? Yeah, please.
Okay, so the goal would actually be, since I know we're about refining goals here, the goal is actually to just simply work to form the committee, number one. The second goal is to work with the city manager and the police chief to talk about short-term fixes, so to speak, because
Fixes on staffing?
yeah.
I think, so let me, this might change how you respond to this, because I want to get back to our conversation about roles and responsibilities. Because this is how you're describing it so far is veering into the lane of administration. And so I don't know if that helps to like.
It's not going to change what I have to say about it, because the problem is that the community's looking at council on this issue, and we're the ones that have to face council with this. So we want to be part of the solution. So actually, what the content of these meetings are is to be determined, but the goals are to work with staff to figure out what potential fixes are for the interim, and then 2, long-term. And the long-term fixes come into more of a funding issue that council does need to be involved in. Because, for example, the sheriff's office is about ready to get a 15 to 20% raise. And so it's going to put us even further behind. So we need to think about how we're going to start funding and long-term for recruitment and retention. So I see what you're saying, but we have a real concern about what's going on. And so I don't know that there are specifics about what we want to talk about, but the point is that we want to collaborate and that we want to work with staff to be able to find solutions to these problems. We don't want to dictate what they do, but we do want to be involved in the conversations and also provide input. Now, whether they accept them or not is up to them, because I do understand the lanes, but there's many of us on this council that want to be involved in fixing this problem because it is coming back on us.
I want to hear from some others on the council. So I'm hearing there's this desire to work with staff on personnel stuff, which, one second, and then I'm also, just to clarify what we're asking for input on, and then I'm also hearing there, which is a policy decision around funding options. So that is definitely in the policy lane, as we think about funding options for public safety. Second piece, you guys can share input on that. I have serious concerns because that is definitely in the other circle. Peter?
I think that one of the overarching goals when we discussed this was increasing visibility. So there seems to be a public perception problem in that our crime statistics are no different than they've traditionally been, but there's concern in the community. And so how do they see kind of a visible presence of officers? And as council considers their priorities, it's like, do we want increased visibility Are there partner organizations, whether it's the county or somebody else, that can assist with coverage gaps to the extent that there are any, is kind of, you know, going back to that increasing visibility. And then really the funding, the natural funding mechanism would be an option levy. And that is there a community of stakeholders that could get together to
Do you
determine?
guys also have the opportunity to do a fee, a public safety fee?
Yes, we have an opportunity for that.
Okay. So
Yeah, so I think that the idea of any, whether it's a gas tax or anything else, the public needs to be educated as far as what the benefits and burdens of that are.
Yes.
How can we articulate the needs that are being met and not being met, and the amount of money necessary to meet those needs in a way that would make the community decide to vote yes. So, but prior to, and I've gone out for a lot of bonds, a lot of levies, and prior to doing that, education is really a key component, and also being able to articulate both benefits and burdens, challenges and solutions, that all, you need to close all those circles before you, I mean, if you want the best chance possible to ask for money. So that's what our group was talking about what resources might there be, as far as people and or equipment or whatever it is, what are the needs going forward, and then how can those be identified and explained in a way that we can develop a roadmap going forward for how we're meeting this community need, and also correcting this public perception to the extent that it needs to be. Because the mayor mentioned there have been some, I'm not going to call them, some neighborhood watch groups and other things that are starting to form, and that comes with its own legal risks.
Okay, so just to capture some themes from the discussion before I ask for some of the other counselors to weigh in on this topic. It's about visibility, it's about funding, the potential fees or levy, and then the education all around that would lead up to that, but then also currently, maybe there just needs to be some education on current status. So all those things in mind, I want to hear from the rest of the council on this. Jeanette?
Well, I was part of that committee group, and so I think overall, what we discuss is that the half hour or even the hour, or even today, would be not enough time to talk to really solve this issue. So that's, I think, what I heard was, I think it's important to create that committee. And I guess we haven't defined who those individuals will be. I'm not sure if it's something that we can do today, but the mayor did mention these groups. I think visibility was a big thing. And my concern is that these groups are very, I think it's not only, it's dangerous to whoever is patrolling, but also the people that they are trying to police. And that's not very safe. So that's a huge concern for me.
All right, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the way to kind of get things back into the lane is that this group doesn't address staffing necessarily, but we talk about service levels, which obviously those are interrelated, but if it's framed as the expectation is we get to 24-hour policing as quickly as possible using short-term solutions, looking for long-term solutions, and then staff figures out what that means for staffing, but setting maybe the service level expectation to the community. Andrew?
I mean, to be honest, this just seems like a bigger ongoing conversation, and I think there's certainly some things that I could go just beat on that I'm not so familiar with. That's all I have.
Are you hearing a desire for a committee or? Okay, reflect on it more. Let's hear from some others. Megan?
No one.
No on the committee. Anything else resonating with you from these themes?
The word education, I think people are highly misinformed, and, you know, we have a new chief. If it's a goal that he hosts a coffee with the chief event, or, you know, there's a place where people can engage with our PD leadership, and, you know, they give a presentation on some facts about what's going on and who's doing what and where and how we're meeting the needs of the community and where we're falling short. I think that that's important to host something like that. I could see that as a goal. you know, I haven't sat down with the chief and asked him what he feels about our budget and what more he would need in order to staff people. Over and over, I hear that the funding isn't the concern. It's personnel, it's the people, it's the bodies. So, you know, this goal directly affects him. So I think it's important as the expert that he gets some input on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask for input from him as well as Alex as soon as we hear from the rest of the council. Pete?
I like the idea, but I just think it's a bigger issue that we could really do much with at this meeting. You know, I really think we need to do all those things that have been discussed. We need to have the best police department we can have and fund them as best that we can, but I'm just not sure that we're gonna be able to put that into a measurable goal.
Ask a question.
Yeah, I want to hear from you as well, so just.
Okay, well, I was on the committee, but is a goal then visibility? It's right in there, create a safe city with visible public safety. Is a goal saying I want visible officer from 11 at night to 2 in the morning? Is that a staffing and personnel issue, or more of a goal of that is a time frame when I'm hearing of issues with people wanting to be out? Is that a goal? Is that something we can set?
I don't know that visibilities, like at this stage of where you guys currently are, I don't know that it's a measurable thing, the way it's written. So I think we need to think about this a little more. All right, so we've heard from council. I don't have clarity on if the committee is the right approach. In this group, I'm hearing from a couple of you very clearly that yes, that is a desire, and some of you like service levels, education's important. Andrew's still reflecting. He might give us some more after he hears from staff. So let's hear from staff on this. Chief?
So in regards to staffing, there are a lot of things that are outside our control, as I explained in the committee. So we have 2 in the academy. We just interviewed 2 new officers, potentially 2 new officers, but we will not be able to get them into the academy. We don't know. There's no class schedule. The last one that was scheduled was for June. So that's some of the roadblocks that I'm facing, is trying to get the officers trained properly, quick enough. And then the other thing is, as Tyler said, the sheriff's office is going to go up 15 to 20% in raises, and we can't compete with the sheriff's office in St. Helens. So salary comes into play. What can we do to attract new officers?
In the short term.
In short term and long term, because I don't want to hire them and, send them to the academy, and then they're like, all right, they're good to go. In 2 years, they move on to another department. So, that goes, hiring and retention it all goes hand in hand. So I need to hire, but I also need the ability to retain. And that's something that's going to be ongoing. This is not a goal that's going to be satisfied at the end of this year. I can tell you that in all honesty. We're looking into 2024 to hopefully accomplishing that goal.
And what would the benefit or like advantages or disadvantages potentially of a committee be with I'm understanding as you frame it, members of the public and members of council?
I talk to the council members whenever they have a question. A committee, we're just gonna reiterate the same things over and over and over again. I have roadblocks. I can explain this if we get into a committee. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm just gonna repeating the same things. It's.
Yeah, because you can't get into personnel data. You can't get into any of that stuff. The analysis that's underway is really ultimately the data that is going to provide the most benefit.
And that just occurred Friday, so, we're really waiting for that to come. But there's so many moving parts, especially like you have to take law enforcement as a whole now. What is happening here is happening everywhere.
Yes,
This
is a conversation that's happening in every city this year. I just got back from Hermiston and they talked about a public safety fee because they're struggling with the same stuff. Recruitment, retention, and just the increasing costs and demands.
I don't think, I'm sorry. We never talked about a committee. And we didn't want public. I don't think that was.
That was what I heard when Tyler presented. I heard 2 people, 2 counselors and staff. So I want to be clear when I ask for direction on where we're going, like to make sure that you guys understand the options on what you're giving direction on. Alex, do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, like the chief said, it's frustrating and we're facing a lot of challenges, but these aren't things that are going to be fixed quickly. If we actually had the number of staff we have budgeted, we could be doing 24/7 coverage. The fact that we're having a hard time getting staffed up, it's hard to overcome that. It takes a really long time to get anyone solo status right now, especially with the academy being as backed up as it is. Considering, just general, personnel, ongoing concerns in the department, no, those absolutely cannot be shared. It's confidential. So, even though it's challenging and, it's something we wish maybe you could be more forthright about, we can't. And yes, more funding would be fantastic. That is definitely something that's more of a policy level that council could look at. Some kind of, if compression's a concern, we could look at a fee instead of trying to go for an operating levy for sure. That's certainly an option. So, that would be something that council would absolutely have to champion and support and be out and, pushing in the community, because obviously at a staff level, we can't do that. So that the funding part would be hugely helpful. But in terms of shifts and personnel and all of that stuff, no, I do not think it is.
Okay. So just checking in with the council again on this, what feels like the right next step for this next year? Is it a committee?
So part of the problem is though, and the reason the committee or work group was referenced was because we don't feel like we have enough information to respond to the public that's coming to us. So there is, where is the middle ground of where we get this information and talk through these issues? These are very complicated issues, and we're not trying to step on staff we're not trying to step on staff's toes with this, but we also, as elected officials, elected by our constituents, we need the information and to know what's going on to be able to respond to our constituents. It's us that's on the ballot, not staff. And so this goes back to my performance issue that I asked early on today, is if we don't have the information to understand what's going on, then we can't properly gauge if the city manager, any city manager is doing their job or not. So this is creating a huge problem for us because we're hearing all of these issues in the community and the negative feedback, but we don't have the information to know if, we know that we can't direct department heads. We know that we are collectively the boss of our city manager. This is creating a toxic issue. I'll leave it at that.
Can I ask, what is the status of the needs analysis? When will it be complete?
Hopefully within the next 2 weeks.
We don't know what the scope of the needs analysis is. That's the other issue.
Jim Band sent it to you and he said he wanted to talk to you about it, but you didn't get back to him.
So I don't want to get into an argument about, that's not going to be productive. So the question was, so in 2 weeks, you guys are going to have a lot of data, I would assume. Is that the result of the needs analysis?
Yes.
Some data.
We
on
cover
what the
several
staff-
things. Also, it's a standard scope of work that the Oregon Association of Chiefs puts together, and they're generally fairly unwilling to change it. So kind of, it is what it is, but it didn't cost us a lot of money, and they come in and do a pretty exhaustive look at the department. So we thought that'd be really helpful, and that'd be a document that council could review.
It is very helpful, but again, it doesn't address my current staffing.
Okay.
I have been working on this since the day I started. I cannot get people in the academy as fast as I would want. I don't not put those classes together. I do not schedule them.
Right.
I got hired in May. I was not able to get to the academy until December. I hired officers in August.
So this is where we get into this
Yeah.
external factor thing.
Yeah.
That you guys have to set realistic goals. There are some things outside of the city's control that you cannot influence. And so is it the best use of staff and council's time to form another committee? I think that is a key question. When you've got some data coming forward, but there are also these external factors that, I don't know if there's advocacy or other work that the council could be doing to help expedite, getting additional academy resources in place. But it's that some things are going to be outside of the city's control. And so when you talk about performance evaluation stuff, I've never seen a city manager being evaluated on stuff that's not even within that person's control. Those are external factors. And this is stuff, you can talk with other city attorneys and other elected officials, but I don't think you're going to find that in an evaluation process anywhere, be satisfied with what you might see elsewhere. Megan?
I'm just curious, we know that the goal will be complete needs analysis. Should we create a goal that says like prioritize findings from the needs and, from the needs analysis. That would be our goal is we know it's gonna be done, so now what are we gonna do? Maybe, you know, prioritize, you know, whatever from the needs analysis, and then maybe, you know, we're talking about a funding source because we want more incentives, we want more of a long-term, so would a goal then be, explore funding, additional funding source for PD? That would be like a clear goal. I don't know, I'm just trying to
Yeah, you
hash
just,
these things
you
out.
could
but-
be. I saw another Jeanette's hand pop up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment, being part of that group, I think that came up because like some of the committee members in the group were hearing from the community, and it seems like it was something dire. For me, like I said, again, people trying to do this on their own should not be doing that, should leave that to the professionals. I think that Chief had a great idea as far as visibility, probably, I don't want to share what that was, but you did have a great idea that can possibly, on a short term, be a solution to visibility. But I think that having what Megan said, maybe that makes more sense as a goal.
Tyler, and then Drew.
So the whole purpose and intent of this is basically to be able to have dialogue and share information, because as we're witnessing right here, we're getting all this new information, or at least updates on information. Really, the point of a committee or work group was to be able to stay active in dialogue and also show the community that we care about public safety, and that as your elected constituents, we are having these conversations with our appointments. So for me, I don't feel like we're getting the information that we need to know to be able to properly respond to our community. Do I know what the balance is there? No, I don't. I'm willing to be educated on it. But the point is that we can't even get to these conversations because we're not even willing to form a work group about it. I'll leave it at
So
that.
let's just get clarity on this. I just want to understand from the council, who is in support of forming work group? And if this is one that you guys want to work on, then let's scope with that.
Can I define the work group that we had recommended or thought of? Was not people, no public. I was just thinking maybe two of us, and those two just kind of talk about our current staffing levels and determine, are there anything outside the box we can do in a very short term? And the committee or group may not last very long, because I think, like you said, there's a long-term goal that we're working on that we're going towards.
Do you guys have a process in place for establishing council subcommittees? Practice that you guys have done?
It's to the mayor, and then we vote on it as council at a council meeting.
So is there a desire to have a council subcommittee with 2 counselors on it?
I just have a comment that's resonating with me earlier that Alex had mentioned. When she is hiring people, she is seeking input from experts and people that work with them. And I would not say that anyone on this council is an expert in this area. And so in my opinion, I don't think it's purposeful or helpful to the people that are experts.
Well, the other thing is too, is, I mean, if the really here, the goal is just a couple of counselors want to talk to the chief and we can always schedule a meeting. That doesn't have to make it a work group. I mean, anytime they request it, we schedule time. So I guess we do that anyway.
So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get the sense from the group. Is there a desire to put an objective up here to assign a specific work group, which would essentially be going over this like needs analysis?
Yeah, I mean, what if we even like put an end date on it and just say, look, for 3 months, we are going to put together a group of people who are going to look at, get some metrics, get some numbers, assess where we're at, look at all the options for, stopgap measures that might get us to where we need to be in terms of visibility. And then, absorb the information from the needs assessment and, make a recommendation, provide input.
Does the needs analysis talk about salaries and pay? Is that
They look at
scope?
the budget, yes, they look at the budget and staffing, they do.
Okay,
I just want to comment based on what Megan said. That's not what we're trying to do. I think the intent is that we're trying to gather more information so that we know how to respond to our community members. I mean, there's posts on social media almost but a couple times weekly at least about this. And so, I feel, for me, I feel responsible to our public that elected me. And when I don't have the information to be able to give them accurate answers and respond to them, I feel terrible about that.
So I'm hearing an outcome of a desired outcome to have additional information. I'm not sure, but I think that's shared by the whole council.
It is, but this was a goal
Not just
last,
a worker.
this was a goal last year too. The public safety stuff was a goal last year too. And we really didn't make any progress on it as far as what the actual goal was, as far as I recall off the top of my head anyway.
It just seems to me that if we're gonna do something like that, maybe the chief and Alex can decide what kind of input they need and to move forward with that. I don't see a problem with doing it myself, but it's not just to inform the council members in that group, but it's also to, as I understand it, to maybe put together some creative ideas to get things moving forward in the best possible way with the police department.
If you guys are gonna form a subcommittee, you should be giving staff, you should be agreeing on what the scope of work is. Otherwise, you could end up with scope creep. Again, we just did this in Beaverton with their governance staff. The governance committee has a scope of work, which you probably won't decide today. You should probably have a work session where you talk about that and determine what that is. And collectively, understand what's gonna come out of that work. Otherwise, you're allocating staff resources on something that's not, the collective desire of the group. Because I'm hearing different things from everybody.
I'm fine moving on, and if we need to discuss, I can talk with Alex. And decide what we can do to move it forward. I think Stephen knows pretty much what we were thinking, so between the two of them, I think we can figure this out.
Okay.
But I do have on that first one, it says maintain sufficient. We aren't maintaining sufficient. Can we say it to achieve or work towards sufficient staffing levels? Would be my.
Yeah, I also heard from Kim about this first one, 3.1. It's about complete the needs analysis, prioritize the recommendations to work towards that sufficient staffing level. Okay. So other ideas of this. I don't know if you guys need a goal around a subcommittee or if you're gonna bring that back in a work session and talk and identify it there.
Right now, I'm thinking not a goal.
Okay. Others? Can I just get a quick poll on that? Do we need an objective that states there needs to be a subcommittee, knowing that you would scope it further, or that's something you guys are gonna bring back in a work session?
We just need to find out a way to communicate on this is really what it comes down to and get information.
Yeah, I would say in lieu of committee, we put together the list of metrics and information that we need to.
Okay, so it's about scoping the data that's needed to be able to better inform and educate their community on public safety status on current levels and what your working goals for the future, something along those lines.
I don't think we should make it a goal. I think we should have Mayor and Alex get together and put together a plan to either move forward with this or not.
Andrew, what you might have.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't think we need a goal. And I agree with Alex. I think the chief has council has an open door with the chief through Alex. So if we do want more information on something, we have an avenue that I feel comfortable with already.
Yeah, I mean, is there a reason that, if there are specific questions that those haven't just been sent to me, so we could get that information to you?
It's a collective. We need to have a discussion about it and have a collective conversation about it because everybody has different questions and ideas. We learn from each other's questions. The main point of what we brought up was to get more information, understand what we're doing, and so the council can respond to the community members that we're responsible for. Staff is not responsible in the same capacity the council is. We're elected, and so we're trying to open the door to be able to get accurate and complete information to the extent that we can to be able to respond to these questions. We're the ones that are engaged in the community, as we talked about earlier, we're the ones that are engaged and connected to our community members. I don't feel like I have that information. And so this was an attempt to figure out, there wasn't really anything defined here. We could have done that during the creation of the committee or whatever you want to call it, but now we're not doing it, so whatever.
Okay, I've been hearing, we don't need a goal, we need a goal, I don't know. Megan, we need to close the loop on this because we still have 2 other areas we have need to.
I don't want to keep talking about that. That's pretty, it's super gray. I'm very confused with what people are seeking. I just want to make sure that we get through the public safety goal, and
Okay,
I didn't know if some of the comments they made earlier about.
okay, well, let's move on, and if this resurfaces in some format that the group can support, then we'll come back to it. All right, so what did you guys have next?
3.2, I crossed it off.
Complete, okay?
3.3 is coordinate with Columbia County 911 district on the new emergency communications radio system. Staff would like updated guidance and discussion to define this objective more. So it has progressed, and we do still want to stay involved and maybe retitle it, refine it.
What's the goal?
We were thinking the actual goal was they're in a period right now where they're creating a subcommittee and they're doing some other things. So basically we know when they get done with that it's gonna go to a funding request. And so far there's been a lot of concerns about the safety component of what they're doing in the funding request, about how it could impact the city financially. And so basically we thought that maybe just rewording it to when it does get to that, that we support whatever's in the best interest of the city and the community as far as the funding request goes and the actual safety component of their design. We didn't have a lot of time to talk about this, so.
I don't know how to make it a goal, but we do still want to be involved when their decision comes up.
I'm against keeping this as a goal because the city has to maintain neutral on things that go on a ballot. Even when we presented the fuel tax, we had to write it in a way that was very neutral, even though that was something we were seeking funding for. I think that there's a lot of risk in this goal, and I think it was very important to have this last year. But I think the
Analysis is.
what we have all the, I mean, we've done what we can to move this process along, and it's not in our hands. It's in the voters. It's in the board of 911 and then the voters, and the city has to maintain neutrality on that. And, you know, we've educated thus far, but it's going to go on a ballot and we can't be a part of that, in my opinion.
Other comments on this, Kim?
Question about their process here. So there would be the opportunity to request an RFP be done, correct?
We've requested that they do that already,
But
and they haven't been willing to do that.
Because they were gonna move forward with Motorola and then we could do an RFP in tandem while we're.
Well, no, actually, they don't want to do an RFP until they talked about essentially working with Motorola for the next 6 months to come up with a proposal just for Motorola. And if they didn't like it, then they said, well, maybe we'll do an RFP at that point.
So part of the problem is that they haven't consistently described what they're doing.
Right.
So that multiple of us have attempted to understand what we're doing, and we all arrived at slightly different conclusions. I've had a couple of conversations with their attorney. He's never previously represented a government or dealt with public contracting issues. I think he's working very hard to get up to speed, but when you're talking about very technical requirements around something like sole source contracting, it is really hard to get up to speed. And so I have tried to, as politely as possible, just highlight a couple of things for him so hopefully he'll consider them. But I think one of the issues is that, if someone's like not as familiar with the law, just figuring out what your issues are so that you can come to determinations can be difficult too. And because they can't really articulate what they're trying to do, So they'll use, like, sole source is a legal term of art. That means a certain thing. And then you look at the Oregon administrative rules and, you know, you do those things. But I think that what they're kind of suggesting is kind of a, kind of a contingent something. I don't think they're far enough down the road for us to really understand exactly what they're doing, at this point.
So if we've exhausted our opportunity to like push for an RFP, then I guess it would fall off. But if there's still a opportunity down the road, maybe keep it on.
I guess potentially, it would, that would only happen, I think, if they were unhappy with what Motorola ends up presenting to them. Regardless, the chief is still our rep on their user board, so there's that connection there. But that's kind of why we just were curious to have a little bit more guidance on what, you know, if this stayed on, what does that look like for staff? How do you want us to participate beyond his participation on the user board? Well, you know, what does that look like?
Gerald?
I met with the Director Fletcher this week, and there's a very good chance they won't go to a bond. He's trying not to. Could be an operating levy. So those are two different things on our behalf. He did say it could still go to RFP, like Alex said, if it comes back and not how they really expected it, if that's even an option. So there is still a lot there, but I don't think there's a goal other than having Tyler Oz, the liaison, still going to the meetings, reporting back at this time until this comes back with their information from Motorola and WCN. There's not a lot going on at this time to set a goal. At that time, yeah, maybe we say, okay, here's what they came out with. Now as a collective, we can kind of decide from there.
Yeah, make a point of clarification, I'll make it quick. So these are council goals, and as electeds, we actually can take a position on levies and bonds and things like that. So I just want to point that out. And we can even pass a resolution of support or non-support when it comes down to it, when more information comes out. So go ahead, I'm sorry. I'll let you take
Oh,
over.
no, you wanted to make a point. Okay, so I'm just, I'm not hearing any consensus on whether this stays as a goal or needs to be a goal.
From what I picked up in the group, it was more like this is out of our hands and Chief is in the committee and Tyler's liaison. So
Are you guys okay with removing this? Is there any support to remove it?
It's still important, but it's not really a goal.
Yeah, there's no way to really measure it at this point. Okay,
We can still do it through other.
okay, so we're gonna remove 3.3.
3.4.
Oh, 4.
No, that's
Well,
3.3.
what is it? It's 3.3.
Okay. All right, I'm just a time check. We are not gonna make it to, we're gonna have to finish the goals and wrap up after that. So if you guys want to stay to talk about committee liaisons, I just don't envision us getting there by 4.
I can make ours really fast though.
Okay, 3.4.
The Chief Lagaza, they finished the paper and he's reviewing it. And if everything's good, then we can cross that off. So, but he hasn't reviewed it yet, so
You guys want to do the emergency response plan?
he's received it, right?
Yes.
He received it, just needs to review it. And if there's stuff in there that he doesn't really like, then we might want to address it. But if it's all good, then we can remove it from the list.
Has that been done in coordination with the fire department? Like who's involved?
The emergency management finished theirs. I just received a copy, which may encompass what we need here. So I just have to review it. I just received it.
Okay, so then is there a way that we kind of take their recommendations or forecasts and then like operationalize it at the city level?
That's what I'm reviewing now.
Then he'll report back and then at that point we'll call it complete or need more.
Yeah, once I review it, I can bring it up.
So leave 3.4 for now. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
to complete that. All right, 3.5.
Engage a school district to enhance. At this time with our staffing levels, we can't continue that program. So we would say to remove it. They are working to do our part around the schools on our half, but until we can get fully staffed, then we can go back to the school and say, or you want to get involved in that program, it's gonna cost them, it's gonna cost us. But at this point, I think we can remove it.
Well, the other piece of that was that the chief informed us that he doesn't think we're gonna be at full staffing until later. Don't want to give too much detail, so we're just cognizant of being able to do an extra program, so to speak, without full staffing.
Yeah, so are we okay with moving
I think
that?
the four of us, but we just can't make it a goal.
All right, then what about,
36, 37 wanting to combine.
yes,
According to Legal, at this time, because of our staffing, we aren't ready to do Citizen Academy programs, but they are working for it. They're directing a curriculum or developing a curriculum so that when we are ready. So I say we remove it at this time and revisit it at the end of the year or next year.
are you guys okay with that? Yes. 36, 37.
And then you had one new objective, staff recommends a new objective similar to increase code enforcement operations in the community. We weren't sure how to respond to that. So writing tickets, code enforcement.
Is there support for that?
Yes.
Yes. Yes,
And that's their measurables there, right?
yes. Okay, so add.
What do we hire? So hire code, would the goal be hire a code enforcement officer? What is the goal?
Right now, it's us. We're doing the code enforcement and I guess revisit that during the budget.
Yeah, we'll look if we can do, we've done part-time in the past, to keep costs down, so we'll see if we can do that again.
This just says increased code enforcement operations. That was their recommendation.
If you guys have some baseline maps, you'd be able to provide some.
Yeah, that'd be the goal.
All right, anything else that we need to discuss or revisit for public safety?
I do.
What was that?
I do. The staff had also recommended combining something to say increase the presence and outreach of the police department at a community level. I'd like that to.
Forward. That kind of connects to you guys were talking about education earlier. There's support for that? Yes, yes. And,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
It's, yeah, it's listed, sorry.
Increase the
The
presence.
outreach, but isn't that what we were trying, we're saying that they don't have the manpower? Didn't we address that already, that there's not enough staff? Are you talking about police, right? Yeah.
I'm here, so I think the proposal is to increase community education from public safety.
And how?
I think she's
So-
good.
We do that on our own time, and if we do have staff on, we'll stop by. So like when we did the movies in the park, we volunteered our time. So we find a way to get out there. So we did our candy giveaway, we did our food collection, the moves in the park, we were all at Adventure Fest. We find a way to make sure it's done. The lieutenant and I are in the schools every couple of days. Lieutenant's been out by the school, so I don't think you ever have to worry about that. We'll be present. And we just sat down this week to talk about doing the coffee with the cop. We actually mentioned the senior center as a place to do it and over at Cathedral, so we'll do a couple.
Which is great. I mean,
Yeah.
that's great. I just.
The community engagement will make work.
So word is
Sure.
just rewording 3.6.
So it's about increasing community engagement and outreach around public safety.
Increasing or continuing?
But these are council goals. So how does
Yeah.
that fall into council goals?
Because we have to fund some of these things, and if it's not on the list, then it shouldn't be in the budget.
But he just said he does it voluntarily, so that's what I'm like confused. So this is during your time or during?
If I have officers, they're on duty, I come in. But we still have the cost of like food,
Right.
candy, the donuts, when we do the donut giveaway. So we do fund those things.
So would that be supporting the police department to volunteer on community events
I
or,
think it would just be the fund so that we could do community.
right, so that would be under funds?
So funding community outreach and engagement for public safety.
I think that would work.
That was like a tangible, actionable. Okay, yes, is there support for that?
Increased community engagement.
It would be to fund, increased engagement outreach efforts by the police department. All right, are we ready to move to parks?
Can I add?
Yeah.
Haley, anyone know in public safety? I think this would fall in potentially to the houseless situation.
Okay.
I heard a lot of talk about, you know, the different cities at the small city meetings starting to make action plans for how we potentially deal with addressing, you know, folks that have set up in public spaces. Do we need to do that? Create just like a, here's the resource.
Ordinance.
Yeah, here's the resources available to us. Here are our options. Here's what's legal. Here's what's not.
We could have a work session about that. We have things in place already. There have been some federal cases recently that have helped clarify what can and can't happen. And I would just say generally, as we're discussing these issues, it's all about really health and safety for residents and visitors and others, you know, passing through. And anything that we do needs to be grounded in health and safety and applied universally. And if that's happening, and that's what's happened in the past, then we're fine. We got a call from the ACLU and we were fine about what we were doing in the past. And so that needs to continue. But if we're going to have this conversation, it's really important that the community understands that what we're talking about is health and safety for all people. And when